before I begin, I just wanted to give a huge shout out to Rimsha for reaching out to me and organizing this session. I think it will be a great value add for anyone who wants to switch their careers and become a business analyst, or someone who's already a business analyst and wants to basically upskill their role a little bit. Okay, so let's just start with the session. Okay, so a little bit about myself. My name is Iriva, and I'm currently working as a senior business analyst. I have over 5 plus years of experience in the Salesforce ecosystem. I am 3 times Salesforce certified. And like some of you, I started my journey as a Salesforce developer. Then I went on to become a consultant, and now I'm working as a business analyst. And basically, I just want to, share everything that I've learned in these past 5 years. And I feel like it will be very beneficial for the audience to understand a little bit about the business analyst role over here. So let's begin with the session. In this today's session, we'll basically be going through the core responsibilities of a business analyst, um, and how their role is a little bit different from other roles involved in a project. We'd also be going through some of the skills required for a business analyst and how those skills come in handy in each stage of the project lifecycle in a Salesforce project. So let's just jump right into it. Um, what do you think a business? So what does a business analyst actually do? Okay, the textbook definition of a business analyst is that they act as a bridge between business stakeholders and technical teams, and they translate the business needs into an actionable requirements that drive the right solution, not just a working one. How many times have you come across a situation, if you've worked as a developer, that you've delivered the solution to your client, but a week into the project you get a call from the client team, and they're saying that the IT team doesn't really understand the system, and they're not really willing to use the system, or they're not trained on how to use Salesforce yet? Or have you ever come across situations where you've delivered the project, but like after a year of the usage of the project from the client's end, they come up to you and they're saying that we have data storage issues? These are exactly the kind of problems that a business analyst is there to prevent from happening. A business analyst is there to support the team so that the project that you're creating is sustainable, and it meets all the requirements that the client needs, and it ensures that it caters to all the stakeholders of a particular project. So how do they actually do that? So there's high level, there are three things that a business analyst has to do. Firstly, they have to discover and analyze. They have to do a pretty solid discovery. They need to understand to the dot what exactly the client's requirements are, who the stakeholders are, what do they actually need from Salesforce. And then they have to basically go ahead and document all of their understanding inside a document or in the face of user stories. And then throughout the project lifecycle, they have to basically validate that the solution that they created actually is working as per the client's requirements. And then they basically move over towards delivering it and just supporting the client throughout the whole project. So these are the core things that a business analyst is supposed to be doing. Now, let's talk a little bit about the Salesforce project team. I want to spend a little bit time on the different roles that are there in a Salesforce project team, because I really feel that it's very important for a business analyst and all the other roles in a project to know exactly what their core responsibilities are. Because if they know what these responsibilities are, they'll utilize their time more efficiently, and they'll come up with greater results. Now, before I go on to explain all of these roles, I think that I do want to add a side note that there are uh, organizations or companies that do use the terminology of a business analyst and an admin interchangeably, because that is their requirement. They do require the business analyst to act as to act as an admin, or sometimes as a consultant, or even as a project manager, and that's fine. If that works for a certain organization, that's completely fine. However, I feel like it's still important for each individual to know exactly what their core responsibilities are. So let's get started with the differences. So we have the admin, developer, consultant, and the project manager that are the core roles that are working with a Salesforce business analyst on a project. So I think oftentimes the people consider that the business analyst is doing the job of an admin. Okay, but uh, in my experience, the admin is not supposed to concern themselves with what the client said, or what exactly their end requirements are. Their concern is that once they actually get the requirements, then they should actually spend time on building a scalable solution. Their concern should be, how do we actually configure the flow, or the reports and the dashboards and everything. The business admin, the business analyst gets the requirements from the stakeholder. They get an understanding of what exactly needs to be built, and they get an understanding of why it needs to be built, and then they create the user stories and hand them over to the admin side, and then the admin is supposed to work on the solution. Similarly, for the developer, the business analyst gives the requirements and the user stories to the developer, and the developer has to spend time on creating the code. Now let's move on towards the consultant. I feel like this is one of the roles that is most misunderstood when it comes to business analysts, because there are some responsibilities that are overlapping for a business analyst and a consultant, because at the end of the day, they're both working as someone who advises our stakeholders on what approach to take. But at the end of the day, it is the consultant who owns the technical solution and who advises on the best practices, because they will be more well aware of the latest Salesforce releases. They will be more well aware of the governor limits. So it's the consultant who owns the technical solution, who owns the design. The business analyst, on the other hand, they can, sort of steer their conversations with the stakeholders in such a manner that they're telling them that, you can buy so and so licenses. I mean, they can advise them initially, but their main purpose is to get the requirements and document them. Then let's talk about the project manager. And here, again, like the consultants, this is the responsibilities of a project manager should be different from that of a business analyst, because the project manager's core responsibility is to own the delivery, the timelines, the budgets, the risks, the resource allocation. They should be looking at all of these things. And the business analyst should be, working, or having control over the scope clarity. They need to know what needs to be built and how it should work. The business analyst can work in conjunction with the project manager, and sort of escalate any risks that are coming in throughout the project life cycle, because they are working more closely with the team members. So these two team members can work together. However, their roles are completely different. Now, let's talk a little bit about the key skills of a Salesforce business analyst. Okay, so I won't be going through all of these skills, but essentially we have categorized them into functional skills, technical skills, and then interpersonal skills. Under functional skills, the most important skills that a business analyst should have are the the ability to have good requirement elicitation. They should be able to analyze problems. They should have a good hands-on experience on Jira, or Azure to actually write user stories using the right principles. They need to write user stories that are not vague but not too ambiguous. They have to write the user stories that developers understand as well. Then they have to work on the data analysis, reporting, and then support the QA team and the client team and the UAT planning and the execution. Now, under technical skills, I've added AI literacy because, as we're all aware, in the past 2 3 years, AI is something that's all the hype these days. So the business analyst should be using AI, should be well aware of the AI components inside Salesforce. So if, for example, they should be well aware of the capabilities of Agent Force, they should know about Einstein Analytics and Einstein bots, so that when they're actually having conversations with the stakeholders, then they should be well aware of what Salesforce is actually capable of doing versus what is something that Salesforce cannot do right now. So they should have that core information. Alongside that, they should obviously know how to use chat GPT, Claude, any AI tool, so that they can basically be more efficient with their time. Another thing that the business analysts should have is that they should at least have the admin capabilities. They should know how to work on declarative customization basics. They should have a good understanding of Salesforce object relationships, the integrations inside Salesforce, how to create a report and dashboard inside Salesforce. This is important as well, in case the stakeholder asks for any trends or if they're asking for any type of reporting inside Salesforce, then the business analyst can simply go ahead and use the standard Salesforce reporting and provide the reports to stakeholders. Then come our interpersonal skills. These, I feel, are the most important things that a business analyst should have. First is stakeholder communication. Okay, so under stakeholder communication, the business analyst should be very well articulate when communicating with the clients. They should have a good understanding of who are the important stakeholders, and they should be able to basically communicate with them proactively. Apart from that, the Salesforce business analyst should also have active listening and empathy. And the reason why I'm saying that is because oftentimes, and I'm talking from my experience as a developer, when a developer actually builds something, they have this, what do you say? They treat their solutions as their baby. And they are very attached to the solutions that they make. This is where the business analyst actually comes in and basically tries to understand where the client is coming from, because even though the solution might be perfect from the developer's perspective, if it doesn't meet the requirements that the stakeholder has provided, or if it doesn't do exactly, or it doesn't resolve the problems that the stakeholder wanted to resolve, then it won't really matter. So it's up to the business analyst to actually, kind of be the middleman and communicate with the developers as well as the stakeholders on the other end, so that they're creating the right solutions in the end. Then, of course, the business analyst should have good problem solving skills, presentations. So they should have good documentation skills. They should know how to create diagrams using Figma or Draw.io, so that they can actually um, help the client visualize what we're building, and help the developers understand what they need to create as well. And then the last thing mentioned on this slide is adaptability and curiosity. Now we all know that Salesforce has 3 releases every year. It's the business analyst's responsibilities to be on top of all the updates that are coming in, because at the end of the day, it's their responsibility to basically tell the stakeholders how the new updates can help them in their implementation or organization. So those are the skills of a Salesforce business analyst. Now, let's move over towards the Salesforce project lifecycle. I think oftentimes people think that the business analyst role ends at the discovery stage, but that's not the case. The Salesforce Business Analyst is supposed to be there throughout each stage of the project lifecycle, whether it is requirement elicitation in the discovery session, whether it's writing the user stories in the design phase, whether it's supporting the dev team members in the build phase, whether it's supporting the clients for the UAT testing or the QA testers in the testing phase, or whether it's actually delivering the project. So now let's look at each phase and the B responsibilities in all of them. Okay, so let's start with the discovery phase. Here we have the very first thing we have are the stakeholder interviews. So I would say that whenever a new project comes in, it is the responsibility of the business analyst to prepare as much as they can. Now we have ChatGPT to go ahead and do a lot of research on what exactly does the client do currently. We can go through their websites. Basically, it's our responsibility to be well informed of who the client is, what type of client we're actually dealing with, what types of stakeholders we're dealing with as well. So here you basically have multiple sessions with the client side. If they already have a Salesforce org, it's the BA who's going to go ahead and check out their current implementation, and see how we can potentially improve the solution that they currently have. It's up to the business analyst to basically have proper discovery sessions where they start high level. So they can start by with questions like, what are your top three problems inside your current implementation that you would like Salesforce to resolve? And then you basically drill it down, drill it down to the point where you're asking what the Salesforce future users' current day-to-day lives look like when they're actually using their current implementation. It's also at this stage that it's up to the business analyst to define the scope. If the scope is not defined, then they should spend time on finalizing the scope at this stage. Because if any of you have actually worked on a Salesforce project, then you must know that there are situations where client comes in with change requests or they want something more to be done, right? If the business analyst define the scopes at the very first stage, then the project team will not be going through hoops to basically deliver the solution for the client. So define the scope, understand the client stakeholders, and one thing that is very important at this stage is that you should be very well aware of who the decision makers are in the project. Because there was a project that I've worked on where only the IT people were involved throughout the project lifecycle. And I think we were at the deployment stage, and that's when we realized, or that's when we had meetings with the executives. And when they saw the system, it did not make sense to them. So it's very important to know who your stakeholders are, know who your decision makers are, do proper research, ask the right questions, and basically see what kind of Salesforce clouds do they have. Do they have enough licenses? So you have to look at all of these things during your discovery sessions. The next thing again is that you have to go document their current state. If they have a Salesforce org, go through what their current implementation is like. Try to understand the different personas involved, the different people that are using their current implementation. Another thing that you have to be very cautious about at this stage is that you should be focusing on the stakeholders' business needs, and you should not be focusing on solutioning or giving
River,
an
sorry, I'm cutting you off. Actually, there is some noise on the background.
okay.
I think it's fan or something.
Can you hear me correctly now?
I can hear you fine, but there's some
Yeah.
noise.
Okay, I think let me see. change my headphones. Wait and see if that helps.
Sure.
Limsha, can you hear me now?
I can hear you.
Am I audible?
You are, but still there's some noise.
Okay.
Yeah.
Limsha, can you hear me?
I can't,
We
but
can hear you, but
it's
very
just,
less.
yeah.
Oh, wait. Let me rejoin this session, okay? Just a minute.
Sure.
Sure.
Hi guys, I'm back. Sorry for the interruption. I'll try to speak a little bit louder so that I'm audible to the rest of the audience. I have tried to change the configurations on my headphones, but I think the problem persists. Sorry for the interruptions. Let me share my screen now. Okay. So we were talking about the discovery phase over here and how it's very important to do stakeholder interviews in a way that we know who the decision makers are. We document the current state, and then the next thing that you should be well aware of is the success criteria. What does success look like to your stakeholders currently? Does it mean that they the response time to their clientele should be increased? At this stage, this is where you get specific goals from the client's end instead of vague answers like the opportunity life cycle should be better. That is a vague statement. So at this stage, you should get specific goals from the stakeholder on what success looks like for them, and you can define that as what's done looks like. The last thing that you should be doing at the discovery stage is that you should be building the initial backlog. So over here, you write down all the requirements that are there. You
Hey
focus on.
everyone. So if Ariba is talking,
Okay, wait.
we can't hear her, or it's only me.
Is the problem there for everyone else?
No, we can hear you fine.
No, it's fine for my side.
Okay. Okay, let's switch back to the slides. Right. Give me one moment, guys. Okay. So we were talking about building the initial backlog. So here, basically, you write down all the requirements down that the client has given to you. But at this point, and this is a little tip for anyone who is currently working as a business analyst, this is the point where you should write down their future requests or any problems that you see in their current implementation, because this will help you in the upcoming sprints or any future projects. So make sure to maintain that backlog so that you can refer to it when having new sprints or refinements. Then comes our design phase. The main thing that you should be working on over here is writing your user stories. So here you have to write your user stories in a way that um, that actually define the persona of the users actually doing an action, what that action should be, and how the client gets benefit from what you're trying to achieve through completing that user stories. There will be a separate session where I will explain in depth and in detail on how to create user stories, because that is a very essential skill to have for a business analyst. But essentially, this is where you write your user stories and you make sure that they are using a particular framework. I personally use the Invest framework, which means that your user stories should be independent, negotiable, valuable, estimatable, small, and testable. So high level, this actually means that they should work as an independent user story. And when a developer looks at your user story, they're able to actually, add some things into the user story without, destroying the essence of the user story. They should be able to estimate the efforts while looking at your user stories as well. And again, your user stories and your acceptance criterias go hand in hand. So make sure that your acceptance criteria are clear. At this stage, what I personally do is that I have meetings with my consultants and my developers and my QA team, because it really helps me get perspective on whether the user stories that I've currently written, they make sense or not. And your project team can actually help you out at this stage by providing additional input as well, or help you consider things that technically that you might not have considered. So it's important to involve the project team over here as well. Then you basically map the to be process, meaning what should the end result look like. Here you create your documents and your BRDs and everything. Then you do your fit gap analysis at this stage. Again, this is something that can happen during the discovery stage as well, where you basically try to understand whether Salesforce does resolve the problems that the client wants to resolve out of the box, or you'll need to work on custom solutioning. So these are the things that you have to be wary of when working on the design. Then comes your build stage. Here, for the project team, you're mostly acting like a point of reference. You are supporting your project team members, and you are the go-to person for them. So whenever they don't have clarity on the user stories provided to them, you're the person they're supposed to reach out to and clarify the requirements, because you, as a business analyst, will be having the most meetings or communication with the stakeholders. So it's the developers who will be reaching out to you. The next thing that happens in the build phase are your sprint ceremonies. So here you have your stand-ups where on a daily basis you can basically have conversations with your developers. If they have any concerns, they can discuss those with you. You can use that time for basically your refinement of your user stories or grooming of your user stories. And then you can have your user story refinement session, which is basically once you've created the user stories, if the developers have anything to add to the user stories or anything that should not be there, they can basically mention that in the refining session. And then in the sprint planning, this is where the developers will come in ready with their story points or their efforts for a particular user story. And this is where you basically identify which user stories should be taken up in a particular sprint. Now, I do want to add that when I'm talking about sprint and backlog, I'm actually talking about the agile project lifecycle because that is something that I've worked on. So during these sprint ceremonies, you can have your planning, grooming, refinement. And then at the end of the session, you can have your refinement as well, which is point 4. At this point, you will also be there to review the configuration. So you're not only acting as a support for the developers by telling them, by clarifying their questions, but you can actually review their work as well because you have a better idea of what the client wants. So these are the things that you will be working on in the build phase. Then we have the testing. So by testing, I mean you as a business analyst should be, for the QA testing, you should be conversing with the QA team on a weekly or daily basis so that you can either help them write the test cases or you can write the test cases for them. And you will have more idea about how to write the test cases because they're basically getting derived from the acceptance criteria that you've written in your user stories. At this stage, you're also planning the UAT. So from the client's end, you should know who the stakeholders are that should be testing the system, what data should they be using as well. So you plan the UAT in this sense. You facilitate the testing by helping out the clients as well as helping out the QA testers at this point. And then the last thing that you'll be doing is that you'll be managing the defects. So, of course, when development is involved, there will be instances where things aren't working perfectly, there are bugs. So, at this point, it is your responsibility to basically log those bugs and discuss with the stakeholders whether those bugs are high priority and they should be resolved in the current sprint, or if there's something that we can basically tackle in the upcoming sprints. So that's what the testing phase is about. Then we have the delivery phase, which is basically getting the solution live and making sure it sticks. So here you should be helping the project team to support them in data migration validation. Sometimes the business analysts work on the training and documentation as well. So they should work on creating user guides, cheat sheets, and training materials so that end users basically know how to use the solution. It is at this point that you should be monitoring the adoption as well. If there are different teams involved, you should get their feedback through surveys or multiple meetings with them so that you have an idea of whether the team is actually adopting the system or not. And if you have additional remaining items in the project, then you can obviously iterate and improve. You can basically use the backlog that you created in the discovery session and use that to refine and create user stories for the upcoming sprint and basically go through the future requirements that the stakeholders might have. So these are all the things that business analyst does throughout the project lifecycle. These are some of the key takeaways from my presentation. So We know that the business analyst bridges business needs between the needs and technical solutions. They own the what and the why. We talked about how the business analyst role is different from that of an admin, dev, consultant, and project manager, and how they are adding value to the project by being present in all of the stages. So this is everything from my presentation. Thank you so much. Let me know if you have any questions now.
Thank you, Ariba. I checked the chat. There were two questions. No, there was one question, and we have already answered it. So yeah, if there are any more questions, guys, you can just write in the chat or unmute yourself. Yes, Laiba.
Hello everyone. Hello Riba.
Hi,
So
Leva.
can you please specify more clarity about the difference between product manager and business
We
analyst
can't hear you,
role?
Laiba.
Yeah,
I
so
got
sometimes this way both these things. Like PM can handle the business role and business
uh,
analyst can handle
Laiba, I
business.
can't hear you correctly, but if I'm not wrong, you're talking about the differences between a project manager and a business analyst, right?
Yeah. Am I audible now?
Uh, if you can maybe move your mic a little bit closer.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, yes, I can hear you now.
Yeah. So yeah, you are right. My question was, what is the key role, like key difference between business analyst and product manager? Because sometimes they play they play both the role.
Yes, yes. So this is why I basically added that slide in my presentation, because the business analyst role is often uh, confused or misunderstood with the other roles in a project as well. So you're talking about how the product manager is different from that of a business analyst, right?
Yeah, I need more clarity.
Yeah. So this can vary from for different organizations, but from my experience, what I've understood is that a product manager or a product owner, they own the product. They are driving the solution. They are responsible for any updates in the implementation as well. The business analyst, on the other hand, they're more about getting the requirements from the product owner or the product manager, and then communicating those items to the project team. Does that answer your question, Laiba?
Yeah.
Okay.
Perfect. Ariba, there is one more in the chat
Hmm.
from Hamad and Asif.
Okay. So let's talk about. Okay, it's a lot of questions. So, is there any format to note down the business requirements when meeting with stakeholders on a new project? I think that there are different methodologies that you can basically use, and we're covering that in our upcoming sessions as well. But I think it differs from person to person. Um, when you're dealing with clients on a daily basis and you have multiple meetings aligned, it is very hard to basically list down all the requirements. There are times when things get missed as well. So this is where you should firstly ensure that you're using AI assistants like or note takers like Firefly, and so that you have a transcript of everything that was discussed in the meeting. So you have a list down over here with you. I personally prefer to take my notes myself as well, because some things get missed. Or sometimes when you're writing the notes, you feel like you're focusing on things a little bit better. So it's better to note things down that way. You can use different terminologies for those as well. Um, but I use a Google Doc or a spreadsheet. If I know that there's different phases of a particular project. For example, they have a sales module, they have a marketing module, and some other module, a service module, let's say. So for each type of module, I can list those down in a particular template. You can ask ChatGPT to create those templates for you, and you can basically use those templates to list down all of the requirements. but you have to ensure that you're listing all of them down, because when the stakeholders come back to you, they will expect you to remember everything that was discussed in the meetings with you. Any questions on that, Hamad?
Meanwhile, we can move to Asad.
Okay. Then we have how can I tackle the scenario where I have to convince the clients to pursue Salesforce while they push for alternatives, for example, HubSpot, ServiceNow, etc. I think that um, this is a very good question, and this is something that happens quite a lot. I think I've personally worked on projects where I felt like Salesforce was not actually delivering the requirements in a way that the client expected. So I know it's a side note, but first of all, you should know exactly what the client wants, and you should have knowledge on whether Salesforce can actually, out of the box, resolve the issues that the client is trying to resolve. So that's the first thing that you should know. First, have confidence in Salesforce yourself that it can resolve those issues. And then what you can do is that one thing that we used to do in one of my organization was that we used to create demo orgs, where if, for example, the client wants to basically improve their opportunity sales life cycle, right? So we can create records inside Salesforce and basically show them what the end result would look like, because visual cues are a lot better for clients, for people to understand or pick up on things better. So that's one thing that you can potentially use. Um, Then we have, how do you handle scope when a project starts expanding beyond the original plan? So I mentioned in my slide that during the discovery phase, you should have the scope defined at the very first stage, because I know for a fact that when you're building something for the client, as a developer, when you're building something for the client may come back to you and ask for some additional tweaks, which may seem very small to them. And as a developer, and in my early days, I'm guilty of doing this as well, that I'd get overexcited and actually build the system, build those small changes for them. This is what the business analyst is there for, to stop from happening. So the business analyst is supposed to basically write the scope down, and get an agreement from the client in the beginning, so that you draw that first line with the stakeholder. That's the very first thing that you're supposed to do. um, and then when the client comes in with changes, that's where you kind of have to see, um, you here you can basically kind of check in with the project manager, because they have more understanding um, of whether we have the bandwidth, the resources to actually work on the changes that the client wanted. So you should have that information. um, Secondly, you're supposed to basically let them know that, okay, we've talked about this is the scope that we discussed in the discovery session, and this thing that you're asking for, it's a separate item. So this is something that we can take up in a separate cycle, or in a separate project, or in the next sprint. But if they're still adamant on getting the features done, then you can potentially think about adding the new feature that they wanted. But you should negotiate as well. If your team is low on bandwidth, you can tell them that there were five things that we talked about, you are adding a sixth thing, so I'm going to deprioritize this one thing from the list, so that we can deliver the work to you. If we're taking on a lot of work as a project team, we're basically compromising on quality. And I'm sure that any client would not want that the system that we've built for them is not top notch, or doesn't have the quality that's required. So whenever you mention the quality, the client would be understanding. um, then you have the question, what is the best roadmap to be a BA if you are already a Salesforce administrator? I think if you're already a Salesforce administrator, you're already on the path to become a Salesforce business analyst. Um, the first thing you can do is that you can get the admin and the app builder certification, so that you know how Salesforce works. And then there's a Salesforce Business Analyst certification as well, which you can pursue. Okay, the next question is, as a business analyst, how much knowledge is required of Salesforce? I would say that at least enough knowledge to have the same capabilities as an admin, because if you don't have all the information, you might end up committing something to the client which was not actually possible with Salesforce. So if you at least have that knowledge that an admin has, then that would be very helpful. um, will there be more sessions? Yes, there will be more sessions. We'll have a second session specifically catered to user story writing, and then additional sessions from our other speaker, Badr Abbas, as well. Um, how do you estimate the cost and the timeline per project and task? Okay, that's a good question. I think, again, this is something that you have to work with the project manager for, because at the end of the day they'll know more about the resources that the project currently has, whether we have enough people or whether we have enough time to actually deliver the project in the committed time. So this is something that the project manager will be looking at, but of course we can help them as well. Okay. Yes, I've just seen Hassan's message over here, and yes, you should have a basic understanding of the clouds and architecture. Okay. Any more questions?
There's one for third.
Functional and non-functional requirements. So basically, these could be your functional requirement could be related to any processes that are currently set up in the system. Uh, can you elaborate a little bit over here, Athar?
So, would you be kind enough to unmute and just explain?
Yeah, that would be better.
Yeah. While we're waiting for Athar, I see Minha's question. Uh, my question is there any correlation between Salesforce BA and Salesforce Agent Force? Like, do BAs use Salesforce agents? I would say that as a BA, you should have an understanding of the capabilities of Agent Force at least, because we can either use the Agent Force agents to basically automate certain tasks for us inside Salesforce. So let's say if we want to do any reporting or any repetitive tasks, we can use those agents. But we should have at least awareness of the capabilities of what Agent Force can actually do, so that when we're committing anything to the stakeholder, then we're not overcommitting anything or undercommitting anything. Hassan, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, sorry. So there are a few questions and there are a few things that everyone can at least have a benefit from. Is that BA is kind of like not a role, but it's kind of like a mindset, because the analyst mindset is basically very necessary for any technical person, the architects, either it's a BA, functional or non-functional, right? Because that's very necessary to ask relevant questions. uh, there is no such thing as a stupid question. So ask them questions as many as you can, because the client in the business requirement phase or the starting of the project actually requires this. And I've seen people come in and share their business things, and people come in with the technical expertise and ask them or suggest them the technical stuff, and then they just go away, right? So it's kind of like a very good thing to ask them questions. They like that. They actually think of it as they're understanding the business and they're interested in asking the questions and they're trying to understand our business. So it's just my thought. I can be wrong, but it's just that what I felt.
Agreed.
That's correct.
Thanks, Asan. Maybe I think there is one more from Hamad. He's asking like about asking questions.
You should ask questions from stakeholder along with BA. Hamad, are you trying to ask whether the architect should be in conversation with the BA or whether they should be with an architect? Is that what your question is? So obviously, the architect can have questions directly with the client as well. But I think because the BA is working with the stakeholder and they're working with the project team as well, so the architect can directly come to them with questions as well. Is that what you wanted to ask? Okay.
I also think that it's kind of necessary if an architect is directly involved with the client at the very initial of the phases. And if BA thinks that he's necessary in the call, then he should be asking
Definitely.
the questions directly from the client.
Yeah.
Other than that, I think the business analyst should be the one go-to person for the architect.
And that's correct, Hassan. And actually, we do include our developers in our conversation with the stakeholders as well. When basically their first point of contact should be me, the business analyst. But if I need more clarity, that's when they can directly reach out to the client as well. But it basically depends on the type of client we're dealing with as well. You can't, if you're a developer, you
Yes,
cannot just automatically reach out to the client all the time. Try to reach out to the business analyst. Thank
that's
you,
correct.
Asadullah.
Perfect. I think we're done with the questions. So thank you, Ariba, for joining, for preparing this presentation. It was awesome. And we now have our second session
Yes,
scheduled. So I'll be making an announcement for that. It was a great session, no doubt, and it was amazing to have you here.
thank you.
And like, thank you everyone for joining us on the weekend for this session. It was amazing. Thank you. I'll be sharing the recording on my YouTube channel. Um, I'll discuss with Ariba if you can share the presentations, but for the recordings, you will be able to find it on my YouTube channel.
I think
Also,
Jefferson has a last question, if he can answer that.
sure, Asim.
Oh, I think that it is very important for the BA to be in touch with the technical lead because the technical lead will tell you the solution based on the best practices inside Salesforce, but it's the BA who knows, what exactly the client wants. So it's very like for me specifically, I used to have daily connects with the team as well as the technical lead because I want to be on top of everything as a business analyst. As a business analyst, I'm the spokesperson from the client side, and for the client, I'm the spokesperson for the project team. So it's very important for me to be aligned with everything and for me to include the developers and the tech leads in all our conversations. I think that's all of the questions. Thank you.
Great session, guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye,
All right.
everyone.
See you in the next session. Bye.
Bye.
Like, share, subscribe.
Did you say something?
I think someone did mention something. I'm not sure. I
It
heard
was
it correctly.
Asad. Asad, can you repeat?
Yeah, Hassan said thank you for watching. I said like, share, subscribe.
I'll do that.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye.